And welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Thursday evening. Know you guys are enjoying a good football game tonight between the Bengals and Ravens, so we appreciate you guys making some time for us. Shohei Ohtani and Ronald Acuna Jr. win the MVP awards for the American League and National League respectively. Great seasons by both players. There was a little bit of a competition, at least on the American League side, between Ohtani and Seager. But Ohtani, just the two-way player. Both of them missed significant time at different points in the season. Seager's earlier in the year, Ohtani at the end of the year. But Ohtani was just the overwhelming favorite on the American League side. On the National League side, Mookie Betts, probably the second best option anyway on that side of the ballot. But we knew it was going to be Acuna and Ohtani all along. But congratulations to both of those players, both of their fan bases. Really fantastic seasons all the way around. And a great way to set up this offseason because Shohei Ohtani, of course, is the #1 free agent this offseason, and that's where we'll kick off our show today. Shohei Ohtani, of course, is said to be interested in a number of different teams. It's said not to necessarily be restricted by geography or anything like that. It sounds like the biggest preference for him is to land in a winning situation. We talked about this the last couple of years, how the LA Angels basically were practicing organizational malpractice because they weren't able to build a winning team around him as much as they tried and continued to try to do that. They just weren't able to provide a winning team around him. They gave up their future for even after Shohei Ohtani leaves. Compare this to what, say, like big-time free agents in the NBA. They're set to become a free agent in a couple of years, so they try to do everything 2 years out before their free agency to try to convince them to sign a long-term deal. They ultimately don't. They go to free agency, and then the team is left without their first-round draft picks for a number of years after that player decides to go somewhere else because they couldn't win at that spot. That's kind of what I saw with the LA Angels and the way they practiced, the way they built their team. I mean, just look at the trade they made at the deadline. That was absolutely atrocious. The Lucas Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez type trades, CJ Crone, just those trades were moves they should have made in the offseason if they were going to continue to try to add some pieces around it. But even then, I still would have traded Shohei Ohtani 2 years ago. And they didn't do it. They said, hey, we're going to try to push the pedal forward. They still, for some reason, think they have a chance to retain Shohei Ohtani. I think the hire of Ron Washington does improve their chances, but we're talking about improving their chances from 0.1% chance to 0.11% chance. And that's just because of where the Angels are right now. They don't have a lot of talent around them. They're going to have to continue to build through free agency if Ohtani does decide to go there, because they have nothing coming in the pipeline. They gave away their top prospects to try to make a run at it this year. We saw how that worked out. They really have nothing left in the tank, and really, their pitching is absolutely terrible outside of Shohei Ohtani. They have some good number 3, 4 type starters, but they don't have a number 1 outside of Shohei Ohtani. They don't really have a number 2 in that starting rotation. So, for those of you wondering, is Shohei Ohtani going to go back to the LA Angels? Go ahead and cross that one off of your bingo board. The only reason I think he might go back is, I guess, loyalty, but it doesn't sound like that's what's really on the front of his mind right now. It sounds like winning, 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 and winning are reasons 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for him this off season. There have been some conflicting reports out there about him already having picked his location as far as where he wants to go, but that he just wants to let this process play out, feel out all these other teams that he may ultimately decide to give a chance to, but he has a preference in mind as to where he ultimately wants to play. I'm sure every free agent enters the offseason with an idea, hey, it'd be really nice to play with this team or that team, but once they start hearing the pitches from those teams, their mind obviously can be swayed. So if you're worried about Shohei Ohtani already having his eyes set on the Dodgers, or his eyes set on the Rangers, or the Red Sox, as the report from Jeff Passan says that those are the 3 teams that really are at the front of mind anyway for Shohei Ohtani, I don't think you're out of it if you're looking at teams like the Mets, the Cubs, the Giants, any number of other teams that could use a guy like Shohei Ohtani. Now, certainly there are some fan bases that you just have no shot. We're talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates of the world. We're talking about the Oakland A's of the world. We're talking probably about the San Diego Padres, even though I'm sure they'll try to put their foot in the door for Shohei just to see if there's a conversation that can be had to sway him to go over to San Diego. We've seen big-time surprises in the past that the San Diego Padres were able to pull off, bringing in Manny Machado, among others. But I don't think that's going to continue to happen, especially after the passing of their owner. I think we're going to see a very steep decline as far as their overall talent level on the field. They're going to trade Juan Soto this offseason. Buster only puts that at 100%. So I would go ahead and count the Padres out of the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes. Other teams that don't have a prayer, the Colorado Rockies. I don't think the Arizona Diamondbacks have a prayer. You're looking at teams like the Cardinals, who are said to have some interest at varying times, but it sounds like they're not willing to commit that level of money. But Miami Marlins, Tampa Bay Rays, all of these teams you can go ahead and cross off the list as far as potential suitors for Shohei Ohtani. Now, what does that really leave you left? I would say probably a group of 5 to 6 teams that really have a legitimate shot for him. The conversation has to start with the LA Dodgers. They obviously reset their payroll this offseason, this past offseason anyway, and they kind of took a step back. We saw that through the product on the field. Their pitching was a little short. The Yankees also had their pitching a little short. That's why I wonder if they might have hurt their case because of the moves they made the last couple of years. But for the Dodgers, they reset their payroll. They are going to spend this offseason. Even if they bring in Shohei Ohtani, they're still going to add another starting pitcher or 2. They could bring back Clayton Kershaw, but he's not going to be able to pitch till around the trade deadline. So Dodgers are going to need some starting pitching. We'll see who ultimately ends up going there. Julio Urias, of course, is a free agent. I'm not sure he'll be back. In fact, I think he's probably going to be out the door. A former Dodger, Trevor Bauer, looks like he's going to be heading back to the States to pitch the pitch next year. Go ahead and pencil him in as one of the starting 5 in somebody's rotation this upcoming season. But the Dodgers probably be 1-1 as far as favorite. I'd probably put the Texas Rangers at 2. And yes, I know I'm a Texas Rangers fan, but his priority is winning. The Rangers are literally going all out to win right now, and we just saw them win the World Series. I understand they were terrible for the last couple of years before that, but I mean, just look at the investment, the ownership group, the general manager, the manager himself is all put into this club, and the level of talent on the Texas Rangers and the talent that is still to come. They can make some moves this offseason to bring in a top-end starter, even if they don't get Shohei Ohtani, of course, to pitch this year because he's going to be a DH. The Rangers are a win-now team, and for Ohtani, he's never participated in the postseason. That's got to be very appealing to him. There are a number of other opportunities out there that give him that type of opportunity as well. like the Chicago Cubs. They just missed the playoff picture list past season. They got Craig Counsell anyway to be their manager. They did not make that big-time investment at their manager spot without the idea of investing in their roster this offseason. They have their own issues as far as their own free agents, Marcus Stroman, Cody Bellinger, among the notables that they're going to have to try to re-sign or at least fill the voids of. Ohtani, of course, fills the role as far as a designated hitter. There's been some rumblings about them being interested in Rhys Hoskins as well, but they're still going to need some starting pitching on top of that. They've been connected to pretty much all of the top free agent starters outside of Jordan Montgomery. They've been connected to Blake Snell, Sonny Gray, Yamamoto, and so forth. There also is the trade market. There's been some conversations about what it could look like for Corbin Burns to be traded there. I wouldn't put any stock into that one as of yet, but keep your eyes peeled on the Chicago Cubs for what they're going to do this offseason. I'd probably say the Texas Rangers, the Dodgers, the San Francisco Giants, and the Chicago Cubs are going to be some of the most active teams in this year's free agency period. So keep your eyes peeled for those 4 teams as to what they might ultimately do. But those 3 teams, probably your 1, 2, and 3 as far as front runners for Shohei Ohtani, at least at the moment. Other teams that are still, of course, in the mix. The San Francisco Giants have to get a big price, big name free agent. Bob Melvin, of course, the new manager there. He has some connection with the Padres guys, so I imagine Blake Snell could possibly be one of the starters that ends up going to the San Francisco Giants. But they have a lot more holes than just 1 or 2 players. So I don't expect Ohtani to really pick them. I think that they're in the also-ran category. Looking at other teams like the Boston Red Sox, they're perennially among the playoff teams, but the last couple of years we've seen them finish in the cellar of that division, and that is a very difficult situation as far as trying to make the postseason every year. You look at the Baltimore Orioles and Tampa Bay Rays, those are the top 2 teams in the division, and you haven't even gotten to the Yankees, who are going to get better this offseason as well. You also have to look at the Toronto Blue Jays, who might be going through a little bit of a retooling phase this season with their free agent situations, going with more of a youth movement on that roster as well from a position player standpoint. So there's an opportunity to make it as a wild card, but I think he's looking for more of a surefire way to the postseason than being one of 5 that could make it every year. So we'll see what happens there. Other teams that have been said to have some varying levels of interest, the Seattle Mariners. I already mentioned the San Diego Padres. These are teams that are more on the periphery. I don't really count them as high-level suitors for them. The Braves have been mentioned as a team. They're not going to spend that level of money on a DH only for this upcoming season. Sure, they ran their organization at a $70 million profit last year, so there is some money, but they're going to spend that money on a starting pitcher. So they're not going to be playing in the pool for Shohei Ohtani, at least this offseason. So we'll see what happens, but that's kind of where our top story is with Shohei Ohtani. Second, we of course have the MVPs. We have Shohei winning the MVP on the American League side, Ronald Acuna on the NL side. I saw an interesting discussion on MLB Now about who would be this year's MVP between the 2 of them, and I got to say, it's a very close race. If Ohtani had been healthy for the entire season, pitched, and was able to play as the designated hitter when he wasn't pitching the entire 162, I think it'd be a clear runaway victory for Shohei. However, he missed the final 25 games. The base running as both players is really good, but Acuna is just in another level right now when it comes to base running. You also take into the account the defense of an Acuna versus the pitching of a Shohei Ohtani, and that gets you really close as to who ultimately wins the MVP if it were to be a league-wide award rather than just the American League and National League. It was very interesting, the conversation that they had, but for my money, just the ability to record outs as a starting pitcher just is so much more valuable than what a position player can do on the daily basis. And the offensive numbers were very similar when Ohtani was able to stay in the lineup. Now, of course, the time missed is what really made it closer than anything else. But for my money, it's still Shohei would have gotten my MVP vote over Ronald Acuna. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Really appreciate you guys joining us once again. And we'll get into a few of the other topics here in just a moment. Let's go ahead and flip over to my screen here for you guys. MLB Trade Rumors is one site that you guys can use to keep up on information throughout the day. But the Nationals are showing some level of interest in bringing back Candelario, who they had last year but traded at the deadline to the Cubs. He played well for the Cubs. They're said to be interested as well as the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm not sure how much of an interest they have, but maybe they could use him as a Matt Chapman replacement. Maybe something like that could happen there. But for my money, I don't think he's going to go back to the Nats. I thought Candelario really overperformed his contract last year with the Nationals. And while I kind of poo-pooed this move last year for the Nats, it really ultimately worked out for them. I thought they should have gone with more of a veteran leadership type of a guy in Carlos Santana, like the Pittsburgh Pirates did. But we saw how good of a year Candelario had, and he was able to bring back some prospects in a trade at the deadline as well. So overall, that move ultimately worked out for them. So I got a little egg on my face for that one, but I'll take it. Candelario really showed us something last year. Now we'll see if he can do it for a second straight season now. But he's going to be looking for a little bit bigger payday than the $1 million or the 1 year $5 million flyer that he took with the Nats last year. If I had to guess what he ultimately ends up signing, there's a lot of money out there, but not a whole lot of position players. So I'd guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 years, 16, somewhere in that range. If he gets more than that, I would be shocked. But I've been shocked before, just like I said. Not too many moves outside of that. Of course, we just talked about Acuna and Ohtani winning the MVP in the AL and the NL. Some minor free agents getting some international deals. There we go. Another headline for you guys about the Blue Jays. I got a few of the Blue Jays fans in here, but they're also looking at other trade possibilities. Eugenio Suarez for the Mariners could be a third base option if they don't bring back Matt Chapman. I wouldn't do that if I was the Blue Jays. The strikeouts would be something I would be absolutely leery of. Dylan Carlson of the Cardinals has been said to be available for the last couple of years. He's kind of lost his spot in the lineup due to Nootbaar, and I think there's an opportunity to get him away from the Cardinals, but you're going to have to give up some pitching if you're going to trade with the Cardinals. I'm not sure they're going to have the best pitching prospects that are going to go back the other way. I think a team like the Mariners, who are looking for some outfield help, if the Mariners don't land if they don't land Juan Soto in a trade, say Soto ends up going to the Yankees, then I think they revisit the conversations with the Cardinals about trading one of their starters to the Cardinals in exchange for one of their outfielders, whether it be Carlson, O'Neill, whoever they ultimately decide to go with. But we'll see what happens there. Ricky Vanasco, former Rangers minor league farmhand anyway, has been re-signed by the Dodgers to a major league deal. Dodgers are going to have to do a lot of work with that pitching staff, though. I'm not sure this solves them any of their holes, gives them more of a depth option, I'm sure. But for Vanasco to get a major league contract is a little bit of a surprise. We shall see what he ultimately ends up doing there. He's 25 now, but we'll see what he's able to do for the Dodgers. More minor moves there. The one big news this morning, anyway, is that the Oakland A's, their relocation anyway to Vegas has officially been approved, and so now they can get the ball rolling as to where they're going to break ground and go ahead and break ground now that they've gotten approval of ownership group. It was a unanimous decision, and that really had to happen in order to kind of solve the PR nightmare that it's been for the Oakland ownership group over the last, year now since they announced it. Now, the bigger issue for them is what are they going to do until that stadium is built? They likely will not play a game in Vegas in their new ballpark until 2028. So that gives them, 4 or 5 years that they're going to have to figure out where they're going to play their games. For this upcoming season, will definitely be in Oakland. After that, though, then the conversation gets a little bit more interesting. They have the option, quote-unquote, to go back to Oakland in the Coliseum and pick up a year-by-year lease. They can go ahead and play in the San Francisco Giants Park and also in their AAA ballpark that already is in Vegas. There's been some conversations about them playing in Sacramento as well. I'm not sure how feasible any of those options are, especially playing in the Oakland Coliseum. There was a lot of contentious arguments between the city council there in Oakland and the ownership group, and that's part of the reason why Oakland finally just said, the heck with this, we've tried and tried and tried. For over a 10-year period since Manfred became the commissioner of Major League Baseball, his first flight that he took as commissioner was to go to Oakland and find out what was going on with the stadium situation. And it's been that long that they've still had this issue ongoing. It seemed like they had some resolution at a couple different points, and ultimately it just didn't work. So for the Oakland fans, sorry, it looks like you're going to have to go a different direction at this point. You're going to have to either follow the fan base over to the the Las Vegas A's or whatever they're going to rename themselves, rebrand themselves with at that time, or you're going to have to move on to the Giants. Giants have a good long history of winning, but you're going to have to decide something else to do because they will no longer be the Oakland A's. It'll be the first professional baseball team ever to play in four major cities and to call four major cities home. So we've seen them move around quite a bit. First team to do so for four different cities now, and we'll see if this is the one that sticks. Vegas should be the one that actually works out, though. We've seen how well the Vegas Golden Knights have done there in the NHL, and they should be able to find a long-term home there. Brewers are also looking at some stadium renovations, so we'll see what ultimately happens there. Milwaukee has been fantastic as far as being able to support that team there. They're a low-budget, low-revenue team, but they still come out and show up for that team. They've always been in contention in the NL Central, not necessarily for a World Series title, but getting into the postseason is 90% of the battle, and then just got to get hot right at the time, or right at the end of the season, and you can go on a run much like the Diamondbacks did this year. So we'll see what happens with them going forward. We saw the press conference yesterday anyway with Ron Washington being introduced as the new manager of the LA Angels. They kind of went through the litany of names that they've been called over the years: the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, the Anaheim Angels, the California Angels, but they are now the LA Angels, and it doesn't sound like they're going to be quote-unquote rebuilding, but they're going to be aggressive in the offseason. They have some money to spend, obviously. There's been some conversations over the past year about what they're going to do with Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. Should Mike Trout be traded if Ohtani decides to go elsewhere in free agency? I think that would be something I would seriously consider, but you're going to have to pay down at least $100 to $150 million of that contract to make it even worth the trouble of trading a guy like Mike Trout. He's missed almost 80 games each year of the last 3 years. His numbers finally started to decline offensively as well this year. So how much are teams actually going to give up for Mike Trout, who formerly was the best player in the game? But this here from Perry Manassian basically saying that they're not going to be rebuilding. I'm not really sure what you would really call it then. I guess you could call it a retooling because you're going to spend some of the money that you don't spend on Shohei Ohtani, but you're going to have to do that on the starting pitching market. There's a lot of teams out there that I think are going to outbid what the Angels are going to be able to provide, and maybe they can get one of those number 3, number 4 type starters that they already have on their roster to elevate into a number 2, or maybe even become an ace. But I still think they're a very, very, very far away from contending for anything. I don't think they're going to be in contention for the World Series. I don't think they're going to be in contention for a wild card spot. They're not going to be in contention for the division crown. This is a team that's going to be fighting for the cellar of the AL West. Now, Ron Washington, I think, keeps them out of that cellar. I think the Oakland A's pretty much have that locked up for the next couple of years. Their prospect trades that they usually have a lot of success with just haven't worked out. They have a dearth of talent right now in Oakland. We just saw them make the trade for Abraham Toro. Just to show you how bad that is, a guy that just needs to get off the roster because of roster considerations with 40-man rosters that they need to worry about, Rule 5 eligibility, etc. Milwaukee was willing to get rid of him for basically just a small type of a trade, but that's a type of a guy that's going to go in the middle of the lineup for the Oakland A's next year. That's just how bad the talent level has gotten out there in Oakland. So for the Angels, they're still not going to be the worst team in their own division, but they certainly aren't going to be in the top 3 anymore. I think the Rangers and Astros have really pulled away from the rest of that division. The Mariners have some great young pitching coming, but they need their hitting to kind of catch up to them. Their strikeouts were their biggest hindrance last year. If they bring in a guy like a Juan Soto to be one of their corner outfielders, maybe J.D. Martinez, if the Dodgers are able to bring in Shohei Ohtani, that means J.D. Martinez is going to have to find a new home. J.D. Martinez really controls the strike zone very well. He would be a great fit in that lineup, so maybe that would be a great way to jumpstart that lineup and get them going in the right direction once again. We saw how close they came to actually winning the AL West. I think they're right there with that pitching staff, but they just need to improve that hitting a little bit better. We saw the comments that Cal Raleigh made after the season and at the trade deadline that they're upset that they're giving away Paul Sewald at the deadline, and that he was upset with the direction of the franchise, the way the trades have been made over the last couple of years. So maybe that's going to spur them to make a little bit more of an investment, a little bit more of an effort to go for it. Jerry DiPoto is no stranger to making or wheeling and dealing and making trades, and we should see him start to make some moves. I think Juan Soto is very likely either to end up either in Seattle or in New York, depending on how that sweepstakes goes. I think could have a huge impact on where the Mariners ultimately finish in the AL West, and if they really have a chance to win a World Series. They have the starting pitching in my mind that's already good enough to compete for a World Series. That lineup just needs to improve just a little bit. Is Ricky Vanasco any good? He is very good. The question for him has always been health and just getting some reps. We saw him pitch to, I believe, a sub-1 or sub-2 ERA in 2019, and then I think he's had multiple Tommy Johns since then. He was picked up after the Rangers had to clear off some 40-man roster space. And that's how the Rangers lost him to the LA Dodgers. He found a home there this past season, and he's still a little green from Major League experience. So I wouldn't really count on anything as far as how good is his performance going to be, but he certainly has the ability. Now the question will be, will he get the time in that rotation? Will he get the time out of the bullpen? How exactly are they going to deploy him? They do need some starting pitching. They could use him as a spot starter from every now and again, but if you're counting on him to be one of your 5 starters, I think that's a mistake entering the season. They're going to make other moves. They're going to add at least 1 to 2 more starters. Kershaw likely would come back if he ultimately decides to come back for one more season, or if he goes to Texas. That's another possibility that's been floated out there the past couple of off seasons. I'm not sure how much legs that one really has, though. I think he's probably going to go back to the Dodgers at this point. But it's going to be a very interesting conversation for what the Dodgers ultimately end up doing if they don't bring in Shohei Ohtani. If they don't bring in Shohei, I think they're immediately going to be the favorites for Aaron Nola, and Blake Snell is probably going to be at the top of the market as well for them. They could bring in both of those starters and still bring back Kershaw. That would be one way to go. But there's not a whole lot of position players, and that's another issue that they have, is that they need to improve that talent level from their position players. They're expecting to get Gavin Lux back at some point. I would expect them to revisit the conversations with the Milwaukee Brewers. We've discussed this at the trade deadline, that they have a couple of players that would really fit well with this Dodgers team right now. Willy Adames from a shortstop perspective, and Corbin Burns, both of which are entering the final year of their deals. Dodgers, of course, have tons of young starting pitching that is exactly what the Brewers need, but that would be a conversation I would certainly have if I'm the GM of the LA Dodgers. Buehler coming back next season. He is. If I remember correctly, he was close to coming back, if not taking the ball in the last couple of games of the season, something along those lines. I remember there being some question about whether or not he was going to be able to make it back, but either way, Buehler will be able to pitch next season. Just remains to be seen how he continues to recover this offseason. But he should be able to return, whether that's opening day, around the trade deadline, whatever the case may be. Buehler will be back in that rotation at some point next season for the Dodgers. But they're very thin in that starting rotation. That's why they made the move for Lance Lynn. We saw how that blew up in their face against the Arizona Diamondbacks. But they need to add some starting pitching. Shohei Ohtani's not going to be able to pitch, so even if they get Shohei, they're still going to add at least one more high-level starter. So we'll see what ultimately happens. But something to consider. Something to consider there.
Get that. Could you try?
Pardon my Apple Watch. Alrighty. Mets and Yankees have discussed Manny Margot with the Tampa Bay Rays. Rays are said to be looking at a couple of different trade possibilities. We focused our discussions primarily on Tyler Glasnow because his salary jumps from $5 million this past season to $25 million next season. That's not something that's considered normal. That's not something the Rays usually handle on their roster. I guess when you look at it, it's 2 years, $30 million, very similar to what they've done for Charlie Morton. But I think they set this one up for him to be traded after this season, or after this past season. A team that acquires him before the beginning of the season will be able to extend him a qualifying offer, and if they lose him in free agency after this year, they can recoup some of the value they lose to Tampa in a trade. Now, Manny Margot is another guy who's making a little bit of money that they've been trying to trade for the past year. He does have some good defensive versatility. Offensively, he's not going to wow you, but he's not exactly below league average either. I don't think he's ever really lived up to the prospect type that he once had, but he's still a very good player all around. You can play him in center, you can play him in right, you can play him in left, DH. He's familiar with playing in all of those different spots with regularity with the Tampa Bay Rays. So whatever hole you have, if you need some flexibility among your outfielders, this would be the guy for you. So looking at the New York Yankees, they obviously need to get some more left-handed bats in there. They've been discussing possibly the idea of Alex Verdugo being a good fit for them as well. Gleyber Torres possibly could go the other way. That's been what some people have been reporting out there as a logical fit. I don't think there's really going to be a trade between those two teams. So a guy like Manny Margot makes a lot of sense for what the New York Yankees are going to need. As far as the Mets go, they're in a little bit of a retooling phase. There's a difference between a rebuild and a retool. Rebuild means you're kind of tearing things down, going down to the studs, figuring out what you want to build your organization on going forward. You're not keeping any of the big pieces of your foundation at the very end when you're looking at rebuild. You're looking at trying to set things up for your next title contention, your next championship window. We've seen that happen with the Cubs, the Astros, the Rangers did it a little bit differently. But they kind of bottomed out, and then now here they are in their championship window. For the Mets, they're not really doing that. They're trying to stay competitive by retooling their roster with what they've already had because they have some big-time contracts already on their roster. You look at Pete Alonso, who's in a final year of his deal. He's probably the one big guy that doesn't have a long-term deal going forward. But they already have Francisco Lindor. They've got some good young pieces already on the Major League roster. Their catcher is a good young piece as well. They have the contract for Brendan Nimmo. They have Jeff McNeil already on the roster. Starling Marte's look like he's starting to fall off a little bit, so that's the one guy I think could be the odd man out if they can find somebody to take that contract. But just a year ago, he was a very productive player. This past season, though, Father Time seems to have caught him darn quick. But for the Mets, Manny Margot fills a lot of holes. If Marte misses a lot of time and they can't offload that contract, he could easily fill in there. Margot obviously could fill in center when Nimmo needs a day off of his feet. As he gets older, you don't want to wear him out because remember, he's over 30 years old playing center field. He's not going to be able to go 162 every single night. You need somebody to fill in there. Left field, there's been some discussions about Juan Soto being a trade possibility for the Mets as well. A little bit more on the back burner in my mind, but remember when he was a part of the Nationals, they were big time in that race to try to acquire him and couldn't get it done. Padres are looking to try to recoup some of the prospect capital that they lost in that trade. So if they don't get Juan Soto, Manny Margot could be a logical fit there. Welcome back, Willard. You think Houston might be able to make a major trade or free agent signing that would surprise MLB or no? A major trade, I would say absolutely not. They don't have the prospect capital to do it. They sank their prospect capital, what was left in it anyway, in the trade for Justin Verlander. Now, they have some good, young, major league roster level pieces that they could make. They'd have to make a baseball trade. So what that means is, say they feel like they can sign Framber Valdez, they can extend the contract of him, they can get a deal done for Jose Altuve or Alex Bregman. They could move, or they could, be in a position where they could trade some of their younger major leaguers on the roster to try to solidify other spots. Maybe their bullpen, maybe just they want a better left fielder. Maybe they're just not set with Chas McCormick. Whatever the case may be, that would be the level of trade they would have to make. Now, as far as free agency, they're never going to play at the top end of the market. We've seen them say that they don't want to spend for a guy of their own type anyway, in Carlos Correa, George Springer, Garrett Cole, Justin Verlander. In order to get Justin Verlander back, they were willing to give up their number one and number two prospects for the Mets to eat all but about $20 million of that contract. Absolutely stunning, and that's just the tip of the iceberg financially of where the Astros are right now. Their title window is closing. They're going to have to figure out what they're going to do. Kyle Tucker's probably the leader of this team, along with Alex Bregman, once Jose Altuve moves on. But, Altuve's getting a little older now. How much longer is he going to be able to be a high on-base percentage guy? How long is speed going to continue to be the biggest part of his game along with the power that's starting to come through a little bit? Alex Bregman, They really need to get him extended in my mind. He's another guy that really needs to be one of the pillars of that organization going forward. Framber Valdez, I think, is going to go into free agency, and I don't think the Astros are going to be able to keep him. I think he's going to command too much money on the open market. We saw this offseason, 8 teams are requiring at least 2 starting pitchers this offseason, with another 15 looking for another starter. I just don't think they're going to be able to afford Framber Valdez, in which case I think they're going to have to retool their pitching staff going forward, going more with guys in the 3-year, 30, 3-year, $45 million range. Valdez is not that guy. Verlander is not that guy. Those guys are way more expensive on the open market, and they likely are going to lose those guys in free agency. Verlander, of course, is getting closer to retirement at this point than anything else. But to kind of keep things open, as far as what the Houston Astros might do, think of what they did last year with Jose Abreu. He was a great signing for them in the second half of the year. It took a while for him to get comfortable there. Brantley, I think, is an opportunity for them to get younger by allowing him to go elsewhere or even retire at this point. But I think he was a great Astro. Really helped, solidify that lineup, kind of the same way Carlos Beltran did when the team first got really good. But think of something along those lines for free agency. If you're looking at the Houston Astros, probably in left field, something in that 3-year, $45 million range could be something they do, and then free up possibly a Jake Myers trade or a Chas McCormick trade. Something along those lines would be about the best case scenario, I believe, for Astros fans. Jordan, welcome back. Ohtani to the Blue Jays. They are one team that is on the periphery of that Ohtani sweepstakes. We mentioned already a number of different clubs at the top of the show that are looking at Shohei Ohtani. The 3 favorites in my mind, Dodgers 1, Texas 2, Cubs 3. Then you get into kind of the also-ran group. I think the Blue Jays fit very well in that group, along with the San Diego Padres, the San Francisco Giants, the Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees, Toronto Blue Jays, among those other teams. But is Ohtani ultimately going to sign with the Blue Jays? Not a prayer. I would put the chance of that happening maybe at 0.5%. I'd say it's a little bit better chance than going back to the Angels, but and that's just because the championship window for the Blue Jays is open actually right now. But getting Ohtani obviously would help their chances of getting to the World Series and winning it. But I think by no means are they considered the favorite to make it to the World Series, even if they added Shohei Ohtani. You look at the way that roster is already constructed, they have 2 guys that already are going to demand significant time at that DH spot. And as George Springer ages, he's going to require some time there as well. This roster is not the type of roster that can handle a player that's a DH only for the next 10 to 12 years of his contract. Now, of course, the pitching, is a huge part of that as well. But I think the lineup right now, just the way the lineup is currently constructed, unless you're willing to go ahead and write off of a guy like Vlad Guerrero Jr. or a guy like Alejandro Kirk immediately to allow Shohei to come there this season, I think that's the only way that might even make it feasible. But we saw them say that they want to invest in Kirk last offseason when they traded Gabriel Moreno. We saw how well he performed for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I thought that was a mistake for him to be the one that was traded. I thought Danny Jansen was a great number 2 catcher. I thought Kirk should have been the odd man out since he's more of a DH/catcher rather than catcher/DH, if you catch my meaning. That's what the Blue Jay GM said. They're looking for a permanent GM. They already have some good DH possibilities that are far cheaper. Brendan Belt was a good option for them last year. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get a reunion if they don't get their number 1 option there, in my mind, which would be a guy like JD Martinez or a Joey Votto. I think Votto ultimately is the guy that goes there and fills that spot on a low-cost contract. That allows them to go out there and acquire some outfield help. Remember, Kiermaier is a free agent right now. They're said to be looking at Michael A. Taylor, who I would never have thought was going to get a big-time contract, but you look at his production last year for the Twins, over 20 home runs. He's really developed some power. He seems to be a logical fit for the Toronto Blue Jays. You look at what the Rangers have as far as a roster crunch in their outfield. Evan Carter, I would imagine, slides over to center opening day. What does that mean for Leody Taveras? Is he just going to fill around all 3 of the other outfield spots? No, he's way too good of an outfielder. His bat's too good. The Padres, I'm sure, are already calling because they need a more offensive-minded center fielder. And Tavares certainly has it far more figured out than a guy like Trent Grisham. I think he'd be a good fit for Toronto as well. There's a number of teams out there that need some center fielders. So I think Toronto, just to kind of circle this back to the Toronto aspect of this for you, Jordan, they're looking primarily, I would imagine, at center field. Their starting rotation looks like they have enough arms right there. They could add a depth piece, of course, but for me, they need to add a center fielder first and foremost. That's their number one priority, at least at the moment in my mind. I think that's the biggest impact they can make on this team. Of course, bringing back Matt Chapman, but we talked a little bit already about a couple of different options that they're already considering. Eugenio Suarez is one, Jamer Candelario is another. Of course, they could circle to Evan Longoria, among others. There's a lot of third base options that they have outside of Matt Chapman, but bringing back Chapman would solve their need there at that position defensively. But I'm not sure he really gives them any juice offensively. We saw him hit 350 last year for 5 weeks to begin the season, and then for the next 5+ months, he hit 206. So, are you really willing? Are you really willing to pay $100 million over 5 years for a defense-first guy while he is available and very good defensively? He's no longer the top defender at that position. For me, you can get very comparable or even better third base production out of 7 to 10 guys currently in the league. And I think there's other guys that you can get for cheaper that give you very similar defense and don't cost you $20 million a year at that spot. Take that money, get yourself an everyday center fielder, get yourself some production in that spot, give yourself some roster flexibility. I would imagine, in my mind, still trading Alejandro Kirk, that still would be a priority for me, and bring in another catcher. I don't think they'll do that. I think they kind of, made their bed. Now they're going to lie in it after trading Gabriel Moreno. But for me, they need to solve that center field and third base positions first before they worry about bringing in a guy like Shohei Ohtani or somebody of that ilk. So kind of keep your options open if you're a Toronto Blue Jay fan. I just don't think Ohtani is going to be one of those options. Now, sure, Ohtani could say, hey, I've always wanted to play in Toronto, and, then you make a hole for him. But until you get that A-OK from Ohtani, I think you got to plan like he's not coming. So as fun as the idea is to discuss as a Blue Jay fan, I just don't think there's any prayer that happens. Just kind of round out the headlines, and then we'll get into some trades for you guys. We talked a little bit about that owners approving the move from Oakland to Vegas for the A's. Again, they will not take the field there until 2028 at the earliest. MVP awards were already announced. We mentioned that as well. Looks like that's pretty much all of the headlines today. Like I told you all yesterday, before Thanksgiving, there's not really too big of announcements from anybody. Most of the big-time free agents don't really sign until we get closer to the winter meetings after Thanksgiving. You might get some trades up until that point. So think around just before the Thanksgiving holiday and right after is really when you're going to see a lot of names kicked up in trade talks. We've talked a lot over the last couple days about Tyler Glasnow, Corbin Burns, among others, Juan Soto. But you're going to see a number of trade possibilities come to light over the next couple of weeks that maybe we're not even thinking about as of yet. I just talked to you guys a little bit at the trade deadline about Willy Adames, Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns from the Brewers. They're a team that likes to retool, not necessarily rebuild. I think they're going to retool with guys that are already major league ready. I showed you guys a trade possibility yesterday about Glasnow from the Rays going to the Rangers for a guy like Ezekiel Duran. He would immediately fill in that spot for Wander Franco if he's unable to come back to Major League Baseball due to his off-the-field issues. There are some international off-the-field issues as well as far as legally. There could be some, incarceration in his future, depending on how that investigation goes. His career might be over as is, or nothing could be, happen in that. He could get a 30-game suspension and be back by May. Who knows? But that would give them some big-time insurance and allow them to have a big-time bat in their lineup every day, as far as a trade possibility. So the site that we've been using the last couple of days is baseballtradevalues.com. If you guys are unfamiliar with it, it's a great way to figure out if your trade makes sense. So let's kind of have a little bit of fun. I know you're a Blue Jay fan, so let's have some fun with the Blue Jays, for instance. I talked a little bit about the Rangers having Leody Taveras as a guy that could be on the move, just from a sheer roster crunch perspective. Think of what the Gabby Moreno was for the Blue Jays last year. They had 3 good catchers on their roster. They decided to trade him to bring in Varsho. So think of something along those lines for the Blue Jays. So let's go ahead and pull up Leody Taveras first. Say they decide, Michael A. Taylor, while he showed immense power this year, more than he ever has before, I'm not really sold that he's going to be able to provide that to me long term. So let's just put that as kind of our floor right now. Leody Taveras, great defender, a little bit better of an offensive floor and a higher ceiling at least than Michael A. Taylor. So we'll start there. Leody has a surplus of 20.4, and he's under control for 4 years. That's huge for the Toronto Blue Jays. Would allow him to grow with that organization. For the Blue Jays side of it, what would the Rangers be interested in what they have? So they're not really going to be looking for prospects, I don't believe. This could possibly be a baseball for baseball type of a trade. They do need some bullpen help. They do lose Jordan Hicks in free agency. He could re-sign with Toronto. I don't think Texas is going to be interested in Jordan Hicks because of the walks. So I think something like that could happen where you get like Eric Swanson. We talked a minute ago about Alejandro Kirk really being more of a DH. Well, if the Rangers don't get Shohei Ohtani, there's a spot for Kirk in that lineup in that Mitch Garver role. So maybe a trade like that works out. 3 years left to control. So that would be something I would consider as well if I were a Ranger fan. Looking at the minor league level, what exactly could be of interest for a Leody Taveras type of a trade? I think it's going to take probably a couple of different pieces here. Relvis Martinez has had a lot of value for a significant period of time now, but his prospect status has fallen down a little bit the last couple of years. So that might be the headliner of the deal going back to Texas, but I don't think the Rangers are really looking to trade for minor league level talent. If they did, something like Martinez and a starting pitching prospect, something like that could get it done. Basically 21 versus 22 as far as value, fairly equal. But again, I just don't think that's the type of trade that's going to get it done. I think it's going to require major leaguer for major leaguer type of a trade. Let's go ahead and clear this one out. Let us know your idea, who you want to trade for. Go ahead and say hello in the chat and let us know what's your favorite team and what trades you would like to see. We talked a moment ago about a Mariners trade with the Cardinals, what that might look like if they don't get the Juan Soto deal done. Looking at the Mariners, let me pull up their roster real quick. Mariners do have some good pitching prospects that they can trade. So looking at guys like Brian Wu, that's probably their top guy that they could move. Let's go ahead and say he's the guy that goes the opposite direction. 24.6 value going one way. For the Cardinals, let's look at the opposite direction. They're looking to get some outfield help. So we talked a little bit about Dylan Carlson. Brendan Donovan's been mentioned as a possibility to be traded. Nootbaar, I think, has played his way onto this team long term. There was some conversation that Nootbaar could be the odd man out as early as last year, but I think he's since taken over that center field spot from Carlson. So I don't think there's any way that happens. Carlson's seen his value really drop all the way down. You see the surplus value down to 5.8. So I think if you do go for Carlson, it's not going to be the same type of a value. Same thing for Tyler O'Neill. He had a surplus value of around 20. You look at where he's at right now, though. He's only got 1 year left on his deal. Again, I just don't see a match there either. So there's some possibilities that Brendan Donovan would have to be the guy going the opposite direction, would fill their second base hole. There has been some conversations between the Mariners and the Reds as well about Jonathan India filling their second base hole. But I think Brendan Donovan's probably going to be a Cardinal long term. I think he's performed very well for them over the last couple of years. I think he's solidified his role on that team going forward. But they need some starting pitching. They're going to have to do something. They're going to have to shake up their roster in order to get it in there. I know a lot of Cardinals fans are talking to me about a Logan Gilbert type of a trade. I think before the season last year, you probably could have gotten that deal done if you were able to push your chips to the center fast enough. Now, Logan Gilbert's really elevated himself to at the very least a number 2 on a World Series rotation. I think he has an argument to be an ace on a World Series rotation. He's that good of a pitcher, and I just don't see that's going to happen at all. They already have a great rotation with Castillo, with Ray coming back from injury. Kirby is in there, Gilbert. They're going to have a very high-quality rotation, and I don't see they're going to trade one of those 4 guys. So Wu is probably the first guy that you could get off of this roster. Now, say you wanted to go ahead and trade Carlson, but Wu obviously has too much value. You're not going to be able to get him. Let's go ahead and go down just a little bit. They have a couple of other good young starters. If I can find them. Hancock was one of them. Hancock for Carlson. Does that excite you if you're a Cardinals fan? I don't think so. But just to kind of, for kicks and giggles, say they don't get a Juan Soto deal done, they want to get some young guy in there. That could be something that works. Mariners probably have to add another pitcher in there. But if you're looking for, some type of a deal to get some value in the outfield if you're a Mariners fan, without giving up some of your top-end starting pitching prospects or top-end starting pitchers, that could be one way you do it. But appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Not too many headlines out there. Congratulations once again to Shohei Ohtani and Ronald Acuna winning the AL and NL MVP awards. Talked a little bit about the moves that we've seen out there today. Wasn't too many out there, but some rumors starting to percolate among some of the lower-level free agents now. Heimer Candelario drawing some interest from the Nationals, from the Jays, from the Cubs as well. Some Juan Soto news as far as trade possibilities with the Mariners and the Yankees. And a little bit, of course, we refreshed all you guys on what's going on with Shohei Ohtani. So make sure you check out the first 10 minutes of our show where we discussed where Ohtani could go. What teams are ultimately going to have a good chance of bringing him in. But make sure you guys join us tomorrow night. We're going to be bringing you live daily updates all week long, weekdays, 5 days a week, and then we're going to try to do another one on the weekend from time to time. We will break in live once Shohei Ohtani does indeed sign, and then at the winter meetings, I will be live quite a bit during that time period. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Follow us on X at UpsideSN and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. Y'all have a great evening. We'll see you guys tomorrow night.